Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm chatting with Gary Thompson and Galen McNamara from Silver47. In today's interview, we get into the recent price action in silver, we get into where it could be heading, and whether or not it is going to be sustainable in the long term. We also talk about capital flow for junior mining stocks, and we get into Silver47, who happens to be trading at just about as cheap of a valuation per silver ounce as you're going to find out of any silver developer or explorer out there. All right, everybody, enjoy the conversation. Gary, Galen, thanks for joining me today.
Welcome. Thank you.
So, Gary, I'm going to start with you. We have silver is at hovering above $57 an ounce. It's traded as high as 58, I believe. What's happening here? Why is silver running?
Well, isn't it amazing? I mean, I think everybody in the silver space has been talking about this for a while. I mean, it's in a breakout here. The shorts are getting squeezed. The bullion vaults are pretty much empty. They had to rush order, truckloads of silver to the vaults in London. So I think it's just a squeeze on. Finally, we're getting some price discovery, and I think we're just in the beginning of this. So I think could be $60 silver by the end of this week, perhaps next week. But fun times. There's lots going on in the market. There's big demand. You saw some news out of China. They're getting low on inventory for silver. China is becoming a dominant player in the silver market. India's hoarding it. So lots of fundamentals that are putting a squeeze on the available silver.
Galen, do you think that this price surge is sustainable?
You know what? I really do. So I look at this as being a historic breakout. I mean, we just broke through, a multi-decade long cup and handle pattern, on the silver price chart. So of course we all like to see that, but let's digging into the fundamentals a little bit more. I mean, we really do have demand outstripping supply, and I think the deficit now is approaching something like 200 million ounces. Like the paper shorts can only sell so many shorts before like Tony Soprano wants his money. You know what I mean? And I think maybe we're seeing that now. And then also the industrial boom, really, because over 50% of silver is used in industrial purposes, and we have like emerging technologies that are really well known now, like solar. But when you have large solar buildouts in countries like China, like you have to get the silver from somewhere. And the other thing I like that's really more applicable to us is that silver was just categorized as a critical mineral by the Trump administration, by the USGS and the Trump administration. And I think that just opens up so many more avenues for American production and potentially DOE supported American production of these critical minerals, including silver, of course, is one of them. And you might be surprised to know that the U.S. imports something like 69% of its silver. Well, like, I don't think that's a good way to go for silver or any of the critical minerals, and we're trying to help change that.
Gary, I'm going to bring it back to you. What's your outlook for the price of silver? Do you think we could see $100 in the next year? What do you think?
Well, if you'd asked me that even a year ago, I'd be probably more conservative and hoping to get to $50 because it took a long time, as Galen mentioned, decades, looking at that historic $50 ceiling cap, which we all know was artificially managed. Anyways, I'm firmly in the triple digit camp. So what is it? It's 100. I mean, break 60, break 70, break 80. I think hundreds in the cards here in the short order next year, 2026. I don't see that's now a crazy outlandish statement. In fact, if you look at some of the projections on inflation adjusted real silver value, it's probably in the $300 range. Like, come on, and why not even higher? Like, it's been the price has been suppressed and managed for way too long. So what's the real price of silver? I mean, I don't know. I just think it's going much higher.
I mean,
So,
I can add one thing
yep.
to add to that, because I agree with that. So, what is the gold to silver price ratio right now is what, like somewhere between 80 to 85. We know that in bull markets, at least historically in the last several decades, it gets down, into the 40s or lower. But coming out of the ground, the ratio, the mind ratio is like 7 or 8 to 1. So like how does a silver price of 53 or 55, excuse me, really equate to a gold price of 4,400 when gold is continuing to rise itself as well? Silver still has a ton of catching up to do.
I mean, just to add one more, like if you had $1,000 silver, let's say, which sounds bizarre given we're trying to get to 60. Um, is that unrealistic? I mean, I don't know. Think about what would happen to the market if we started to see those kind of numbers. Um, so let's see. I think it's a fun time to be in the silver space, and I think we're finally getting some attention, which is great.
Galen, I imagine you've been following social media when it comes to silver. I recall back in 2021, as I'm sure you recall, there was this sort of campaign of hashtag silver squeeze, and it really felt like silver was going to go. And when I watch social media right now, I'm starting to notice it pick up a little bit, but it doesn't seem like we sort of have that mainstream push. When I turn on CNBC, they're not really talking about silver a whole lot. And I feel like the fun hasn't begun until we start to see that stuff happen. Would you agree with that general sentiment?
Yeah, I would, but independently whether that stuff happens or not, I am seeing some buzz on social media, and just looking at things for fun. But one thing that I saw that I have been seeing very recently within the last week is rumors that there are large Chinese buyers standing for delivery of tons and tons of silver, and taking it and taking it out of the market. And that's something that wasn't really happening. When we were talking about silver squeeze in 2021, it was mostly a retail based GameStop style push that really only lasted like, I think it was like a week or something like that, really. And so that was more of a meme stock thing. This is more of a fundamental short squeeze.
So, Gary, let me ask you this. You've been involved in the junior markets for decades. I'm sure that you have some thoughts on capital flowing into the junior names. How much has it picked up, and how early do you think we are into this capital raising cycle?
Well, yeah, I know firsthand because I was on the road. I would say a little more than a year ago, and it was a tough slug getting capital. Only a year ago, so it's been a short time since we've seen money inflows, and I would say we're still really, really early in that. Like, and I use the benchmark, the TSX Venture Composite Index. We're struggling to get to 1,000, coming from a low of 4 or 5, 600, and the top of that market was 3,200. So we got a long ways to go. I think we're closer to the bottom than anywhere near the top, and perhaps the next top will be even much higher than that. So I think it's early days for those inflows. I think you're right that people have just starting to maybe wake up a little bit to this trade. And I was recently in Hong Kong, on an investment summit, and again about a year ago, people weren't interested, and it was actually quite a busy tour, and lots of renewed interest. So I'd say it's pretty fresh, and I feel like we've got a long ways to go, and yeah, I think we're just getting started.
Gary, I want to follow up on that. I was just thinking about it this morning. A CEO of a company that I'm invested in and follow, I noticed was at a conference in Dubai. And your time in the business, has the sort of international money raising component really picked up over the last couple of years in terms of, you just mentioned you were in Hong Kong. Do you think that that's just something that as people get more connected in the capital markets, they figure out? Or do you think that there's just becoming where there's starting to become a lot more interest in Canadian equities internationally?
Yeah, I think both. I think the it's pretty common. The Canadians are well known for resources and resource development, and I think the sophisticated investors go where the opportunities are. And you got to look at some of these Canadian companies that are delivering outsized returns in this space. If you want to exposure to silver, if you look at the silver names on the TSX and the Venture, for example, versus the ASX, there's literally only like a half a dozen names, I think, on the ASX, whereas the TSX, there's a pretty good list to choose from. But then when you start to drill down into those opportunities, it becomes very selective, and there's really not that many names in the silver space, which is kind of the exciting part.
So, Galen, I want to ask you this. Let's turn the discussion over to Silver 47 now. Somebody posted a chart on CEO.ca the other day that looked at ounces relative to market cap or enterprise value. I'm not sure which one they used, but they had you guys
Either way.
as far cheaper than some of your peers, which trade at an average of just under $3 an ounce. So you guys are trading somewhere in the ballpark of, we'll say, under 50 cents an ounce. What needs to happen here for Silver 47 to re-rate?
Yeah, I mean, great question. That's something we think about every day. But first, to identify the opportunity, yeah, we trade at about, on an EV per ounce basis, we trade about 39 cents per ounce relative to our peers that trade at, $1.70 or higher. So, immediately that strikes me as a great opportunity. But, how do we, take the next step? Well, we're really aggressively adding value on all of our projects. Number one, aggressive drill programs coming up on all three projects, potentially resource and PEA updates as well is something that we're considering if our geologic modeling is successful, but not to get too far into the weeds on that. That's just something that over time, it's one of those things that we hope is like slowly then quickly, right? As the thesis plays out, but it's something that is certainly a really interesting opportunity. And the other thing I just want to point out is that, like, look, we're still a very new company. We completed our merger on August 1st. We've been out. Gary and I have been out talking to as many investors as we can to identify this opportunity to as many investors as we can. And I think that this is something that, as the silver market continues here, that look, there are so few good high grade silver deposits in the United States that aren't in the hands of majors. Like, we're talking, like, I don't know, five or six. Well, we've got three of them. So hey, like, we're just going to put our heads down and continue to add value through hard work, and let's go.
Yeah, Gary, before when we spoke, you said that the vision here was to build, was it, what was the number? How many ounces did you want to get to?
Oh, big ounces. I mean, we came up with 1 billion ounces of
Yeah, that's
silver.
that's the number I recalled. A
1
billion
billion.
ounces. Now Galen just spoke about how there's just not that many projects out there. Do you think that number is still realistic?
Yeah, I think it's achievable, and how do we get there? And it's aggressive drilling, and that just takes time, as we mentioned before. You can drill your way there. It's time and money to get to those numbers, and we think we've got the projects that could deliver that as they are, and that's just going to take a lot more drilling to get there when we run the numbers internally, based on what we see in the ground there. But the other thing that we're continuing to look at is M&A opportunities. So it's growing by the drill bit, and it's growing through M&A to add ounces, and not just for the sake of adding ounces, but adding quality ounces in good jurisdictions that can ultimately move this company towards a development scenario where we're actually producing silver. So we're not just pack ratting silver away in the cupboards. We actually want to generate revenue from producing silver, and that's our long-term goal here. And again, a combination of moving up the curve through drilling and M&A that ultimately at some point will be producing. Yeah, and I think that's a hefty goal. But I'll let Galen add anything if I missed anything.
Yeah, no, like, that's great, Gary. To add some context for the possibilities of organic growth through exploration on the projects. So we've got approaching 250 million silver equivalent ounces now between three projects. Each of those projects, especially Red Mountain and Mogollon, they're less than 5% explored. Like, less than 5% explored. So we strongly feel that the potential is there on the projects, but of course, like Gary said, M&A is also a great path forward for us as well.
Where do you guys see more value right now? If you guys were able, and as a shareholder, I hope that the answer is that you guys wouldn't take this. But if you guys were, let's just say, magically, you guys just stumbled across $50 million tomorrow, and you had to deploy that capital, do you think that would be better spent doing exploration or M&A? I'll get your answer first, Galen, and then I'll switch over to Gary.
That is a very hard question to answer. So I think with something like that, hypothetically, crystal ball, perfect world, we get a lot of value through exploration. and deploying exploration dollars into the ground. We've historically discovered silver at, I believe, around 25 cents an ounce. I think that's a really good value proposition. And I think that as you advance these projects, your value per ounce in the ground can go up, by multiples, and that's really would be a nice critical path for us to change that, per ounce valuation upward, and that's what we're working on now. And then on the other hand, from the M&A's perspective, well, look at the deal that Gary and I just did in August. We combined on a merger of equals basis using our stock, and that was very well received by the markets for sure. I think that Silver 47 had a little over a $40 million market cap, and Suma had a little under a 40 million market cap before the deal. So pro forma, 80, and what are we trading at, today? I think it's closer to 150, right? So those are the types of M&A transactions that I think that we're most interested in.
Gary, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with most of what Galen said there. I think I like the value of drilling these ounces because it really is the least expensive way to add ounces. But if you look at the time value of money then and bring that into the equation, M&A makes a lot of sense. Like if you look at the transaction, we went from a relatively small company independently to a much larger company combined. So if you were to think, well, let's bring in 50 or 100 million ounces on a transaction, you simply can't drill your way in, say, 12 months and add 100 million ounces. It just doesn't work like that. So you can do a transaction, say, in 6 to 12 months, perhaps, or less, if you have willing partners. So you can get there quicker on M&A, but you may pay a little bit more. So maybe there's a nice balance of that continuing to drill. And I think as an exploration company, you want to grow through the drill bit, and there's the opportunity to make new discoveries, which are also very very exciting. So I think it's a combination of those two that would ultimately get that growth profile, and that's what's exciting about Silver 47 is we've got quite a trajectory in front of us, and if we can tuck in a few more M&As, I think we're just going to grow. Ultimately, that's the goal.
It almost sounds like you see better arbitrage from being able to find those undervalued assets and just tack them on at this stage, which obviously can change because something I talk about with my team all the time is how price discovery wasn't really a thing, and we didn't really have to care about relative valuations a year ago because every company was just trying to breathe. And now we're at a point where capital's flowing in, people are actually starting to do these calculations. Like I don't think anybody really cared about dollars per ounce 2 years ago, but now the capital's flowing in. There, you got generalists who are going to start to treat stocks like back of the baseball cards and say, I got under 40 cents on this guy. The other guys are trading at $3. I like the value here. And I guess that kind of creates the opportunity. But are there enough assets out there for M&A to still make sense, Gary?
I think so, and the challenge will be as the price moves, the silver price moves, so do the acquisition costs, and those costs per ounces will be more expensive. And if you look back at the M&A peak of the last market, the majors were hit pretty hard because they were doing transactions at a very toppy valuations, and then of course the market rolled over and they looked really bad. But if you get into a scenario where we all think that silver is way undervalued and going much higher, it might look like we're paying too much perhaps for a transaction on ounces. But if the price sort of holds where we think it's going, then it might look actually quite good a year from now or 2 years from now. So it's timing is everything, and you don't really know where it's going. But ultimately, we just keep our head down and do what we can.
A great example of that, Gary, is Kinross's purchase of Great Bear Resources. I remember that being viewed poorly by the market at the time, but I bet those guys look like heroes now.
Yep. It's funny you say that because I was looking at that transaction here just the other day, and they paid 1.8 billion Canadian for it back in December of 2021, and they acquired it for about $360 an ounce of gold at the time, and it sounded quite expensive, but the projections now are that that could be producing upwards of $2 billion a year of EBITDA on a $1.8 billion transaction. Obviously, they got to put a little capital into that. But to your point, Galen, that looks like that's working out quite well.
Absolutely.
So, Galen, let me ask you this. What does the next 12 months look like? I imagine you got your head down. You're trying to create shareholder value. What is a successful 2026 in your eyes?
You know what? We're really aggressively adding value to the projects through the drill bit. So we're going to start drilling in New Mexico here in January. I'm just aggressively stepping out from where we know there's mineralization already. From that resource, continue to add high-grade silver ounces there. So that's step one. Drill results coming there for sure. Step two is returning to the Tonopah Mining District and the Hughes project to really take a shot at finding the main vein on that eastern extension of the Tonopah Mining District. And for perspective, the Tonopah Mining District total endowment is like 500 million silver equivalent ounces over 4 kilometers, give or take. We have a 4-kilometer extension where we've drilled 10 or 12 holes, and 11 of them have hit mineralized veins up to 3 meters at 1,500 grams per ton silver equivalent. But we haven't found the main structure, and that's like the magic. So we're really looking for that, going to take a real shot at looking for that main structure. And if we hit, it's potentially game changing. So that's number two. Number three is returning, of course, to Red Mountain in June with 3 rigs. And number one, building the resource up, drilling some high grade holes around the current resource as a priority, but as a secondary objective, testing a few of the 35 other massive sulfide targets that we already know exist at surface that haven't been drilled yet, or where they are drilled, there's some really good, interesting early results. So that's what we're doing at site. But I think even bigger picture, if we're liking what we're seeing, and our geological modeling and our background work is proving to be good, we'll look at updating the resource and potentially coming up with a PEA. So either that'll be next year or the year after, depending on how our results are and if we like what we're seeing. So it's really is a busy time for us coming up, and we're very well financed. We've got over $25 million in the bank to deploy to really go after it.
I want to wrap the interview up with this because this is going to make my producer Chris really happy. Can each of you guys give me some sort of price target that you think that silver is going to get to in 2026, December 31st, 2026? So you got close to 13 months. Gary, I'll start with you.
Yeah, that's a great one, isn't it? I'm gonna throw it out there. $100 silver.
$100. Do we have a higher bidder, Galen? What do you think?
Putting us on the spot, and I feel like this is the Price is Right. So I'm going to say 101.
101. There's your YouTube thumbnail, Chris. Guys, I appreciate you guys taking the time to sit down and do this. I normally don't get to do a 2-person interview, so it's quite fun and thought-provoking. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to do this. And who knows, maybe you guys will be crazy enough to bring me to site in 2026.
You're welcome, and look forward to it.
Sounds great. Yeah, thanks very much.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, if you want more mining content, check out our website over at thedeepdive.ca.